Good morning and welcome to Health Talk here on AM 1270 and 96.5 FM KXBX. Paul Thomas and Bill Kearney in the studios, and a little bit of snow in the area last night. I mean, I woke up this morning and there's a little tiny bit on the car. And
yeah, I heard that on the Bay Area News. It said Lake and Mendocino County had a spattering of snow, and somebody yesterday afternoon had a thing on the email saying that it was snowing on Spruce Lake Road, or I guess it didn't last very long, but then we could have some more tonight, I guess.
Oh, really?
I didn't stay awake I saw all the snow I wanted to see on the Olympics. I have, I've got my fruit trees. I have Christmas lights on the fruit trees to keep them from freezing, and but it's a little taste of winter. And I looked at the advanced forecast, and it looks like we might get some rain at the end of this week or next week. So I certainly hope so. My wife is out of town right now with our daughters, and so I have the house to myself, and I'm thinking about, I'm going to watch a movie, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get that done, and then all of a sudden I'm doing laundry, I'm emptying the dishwasher, I'm doing the chores, and I'm out and I canceled the housekeeper coming this week because I didn't think I got the place very dirty, and then I found out that I shouldn't have done that and should have let them clean anyway. But to get back to health again, I hate to start this program out. Did we ever get the phones fixed, by the way?
No, it's still 263-5254, so we're waiting on an AT&T representative to get back to us on that one. So.
I wonder why they don't have any business. Anyway, I'm sorry.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. The flu epidemic is still going on. It may be tapering off a little bit, but 2 more children died from flu over the weekend, to add to the 84 pediatric patients that have already died. And I've had so many people ask about whether or not they should get the flu shot or not. This first grader from Connecticut died over the weekend from complications related to the flu. This little 6-year-old girl passed away unexpectedly Saturday night, and the school is closed, of course, with Monday for President's Day, and they ordered a deep cleaning of all the high-touch areas before the school reopened yesterday. That death comes at the news of another child dying from the flu, the flu in the New Jersey community on Sunday. So it's not immediately clear if the flu diagnosis was the primary cause of death for that student who's been identified. If it is, this would be the 3rd flu-related pediatric death in New Jersey this season. So 84 children have died from this flu-related disease, and as you know from listening to this radio show, that it isn't just children that are dying or little kids, it's adults, particularly healthy adults. We talked about what was happening for a lot of those adults. Their immune system, every part of their immune system would kick in at the same time, and they were their body would just shut down. So there's all kinds of reasons that could be happening, and why in this particular time of this flu season that's happening more than it ever did before. I mean, it's been 100 years since the last pandemic in I think it was 1918, where thousands and thousands and thousands of people died all in the same day. And it just, the vaccine wasn't available at that point. We're still trying to get a better vaccine, as we talked about last week, one that will work within 1 day. This gal that had died because she couldn't afford the Tamiflu, which is the antiviral medication. Once that you get, the physician has diagnosed flu, then you get the medication. If you take it immediately, it can delay the onset and also the duration time of that flu by 2 or 3 days, and which time you can get critical in between that time if you're not taking an antiviral. And this lady that did not, it wasn't that she couldn't afford the money for the Tamiflu, and this was reported, I'm not just making this up. She just didn't think it was necessary to spend over $100. She didn't have insurance. It was $116 for the medication, and I believe it was in Texas. And she felt like she was going to make it through the flu without a problem. It happened to be on a weekend, and by Monday morning, or 3 days later, she had expired. So it's becoming more and more important for us to really zero in on this, because the feeling is there eventually will be a pandemic where everybody gets this thing, and many more thousands of people will die if we don't target it exactly. So there's a lot of pressure on the health industry to get a flu vaccine that would cover almost any kind, or at least maybe a shot that would prevent the disease from getting into your system. The problem is that like coughs and colds, there's over 70 different viruses, and the same thing with flu. And to really zero in on exactly what's going to happen is pretty much impossible. But we pay these companies millions and millions of dollars to come up with a link or a way or a nucleus or a molecule that will turn into an antiviral vaccination that people should get. And probably, if this happens, I would expect the government to fund the bill for this. But we never know what's going to happen, and we never know how they're going to address it. We know health care is a big issue. It's taken a background to some of the shootings that are taking place right now, and certainly that should be the priority. But there are people in the industry that are not related to the gun industry that can do many things in order to make us healthier, and we're trying to get those fast forwarded so we can make them a priority before next year. We have other disease states that we need to worry about too, with Parkinson's and cancer and respiratory diseases and lots of diseases, that psoriasis, one of the things we're going to talk about today. The amount of millions of dollars that have gone into finding a cure for psoriasis. And if you think about psoriasis, you think about a little rash on you. Some people have psoriasis so bad they can't even go to work. They can't even be in a place with a light turned on because they're too sensitive to light. So lots of ways to spend our money, and lots of issues that are going to be taking a top shelf. Remember, Paul, last week, I think, or the week before, we talked about Kratom, that drug that's over the counter that is being used for pain control, and people are getting it. It's over the counter. The Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, has found out that it's very similar to opiates. And I thought maybe that's all we'd hear, except for the DEA. But now they found out that it is linked to a salmonella outbreak across 20 states.
Oh, lovely.
So it's often billed as a safer alternative to conventional painkillers. But a couple of weeks ago when we talked to you, the FDA said that Kratom contains the same potentially addictive chemicals that are found in opiates. And the bad news about Kratom continues with the CDC's announcement, which says a nationwide bout of salmonella infections may be related to it. 28 people from 20 states across the country have come down with the same strain of salmonella as of February 16th. 8 of the 11 sick people interviewed had consumed Kratom. The announcement leading the CDC to believe that suppliers or supplies of that supplement may have been contaminated. And if you don't know what salmonella is, it's a bacterial infection. It's often spread through exposure to contaminated water or food. If you watch any of those survival shows and they're drinking water that hasn't been purified yet, and they get a disease. Typically, it can be salmonella. It causes very severe stomach distress, gastrointestinal distress, and it can become life-threatening if the infection spreads beyond the intestines. So no one has died from this outbreak, but 11 people so far have been hospitalized. And because no single brand has been implicated, the Center for Disease Control is recommending that people stay away from all Kratom products, including powders, teas, and pills. It may also be sold under the names including Thang, Kquam, Tom, Ketom, and Biak. And I'll tell you, a month ago, I never heard of this drug. Obviously, that people in Lake County are getting this drug from someplace, and it's not illegal at this point to sell it without a prescription, but the DEA and the FDA is really looking at this drug because of the semblance or the resemblance to a a form of opiate. And now, because of 8 of 11 of these people that have died, that they interviewed had consumed the Kratom. So it may disappear from the shelves soon in medicine cabinets. The DEA is currently deliberating whether it is also, whether the supplement, which is also taken to reduce anxiety and drug independence and drug dependence, should be placed on the same class of illegal drugs as heroin and LSD. If you don't know what those are, the most the lower number is the highest class drug that can be addicting. And so right now, those class 2 drugs are legal for prescriptions if they're written and dated properly. They can't be called in by telephone. And now those are like oxycodone, hydrocodone, different fentanyl, those kind of drugs that are legitimized by the federal government. And the lowest number that can be prescribed is a Schedule 2. Heroin, which is a Schedule 1, and D-lysergic acid, which is a Schedule 1, cannot be marketed or promoted or a prescription written for legally from anybody in the United States at this point. Heroin being the most addictive, D-lysergic acid, which is LSD, also. So it's legal in most states right now, the Kratom is, but there's an important alert on record to prevent it from entering the country illegally. The FDA has captured several shipments of those. 44 deaths have reported in connection with Kratom since 2011, and those are the ones that we know about. Because it's such a new thing on the market, it is not nearly as reported as something else would be. And I want to just for a second go back to the Tamiflu situation with the flu. It's not a magic potion. That thing that you've been hearing about all the time about this Texas school teacher who died almost a week ago after getting sick from the flu, her husband had actually picked up the prescription the day after she refused it and started taking the medication, and she died 3 days later. So while the physicians are saying, and this has always been my problem with it, that it's maybe going to limit the duration and maybe going to limit the intensity of the flu. But it's going to be a while before you realize that you may have to go to the doctor to see it. So by the time you get to the doctor, you have probably been contaminated for a few days. Antivirals make it not zero chance of getting the flu, but less likely the complications will develop. This gal came home feeling sick on January 29th, and she went to the doctor on the 31st. And she tested positive for influenza B, and the doctor wrote her a prescription for the Tamiflu, but she was frugal and didn't want to fill it. So here you had 2 or 3 days that she had been exposed, and she finally went to the hospital on February 2nd, the following day, and found out she had sepsis. If you know, if you've known anybody that had sepsis, which is a poisoning of the bloodstream, that's a life-threatening condition. And even though the antiviral drugs taken within 48 hours after becoming sick can lessen symptoms and shorten the time by about 1 day, there are people that are going to do very well regardless of getting the Tamiflu or not. There are people that are going to do poorly regardless of getting Tamiflu or not. And then there's that kind of middle ground people where most of us are, that Tamiflu may really push them to the right outcome. So in some cases it may be useful. It was the only thing we had to go to when this became an epidemic. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, say it's the best way. The shot is the best way to prevent seasonal flu. We're still giving the shot, maybe 1 or 2 a day. Even if you're very healthy, there are still people getting the flu. So if you can get a vaccine in your system, it's only good. This vaccine will expire in April. That means you can get a shot up till April if the vaccine is available. And then after that time, the expiration date for everything that was designed for the flu season this year is out of date. One of the issues that have come up with people getting these cold symptoms and flu symptoms are nasal decongestants. Are they actually addictive? And you don't think about neosynephrine or something like that on the list of innocent things that people swear that they are addicted to, but it's cold and it's a flu season. What else are you supposed to do? You keep a bottle of solution that you squirt up your nose, and it makes you feel better. It opens up those airways that in your nasal cavity that are normally closed, so you can breathe. And it's more than an addiction, it's a dependency. And after 3 days, after 72 hours, which is the longest you're supposed to use these, you think it's safe and there's nothing to worry about it, but you can get hooked on them as far as dependence. To be clear, it's not like getting hooked on a nasal decongestant spray the way there is something like opiates, but using this kind of medicine for too long can spark a habit that might be surprisingly tough to break. I almost died in a private plane accident back before I went overseas in Columbia, South Carolina, and the individual that was flying, and he was a good pilot, was using Afrin nasal spray, and he got addicted to it or dependent on it, and he forgot to take it with him, and he almost quit breathing because he couldn't open his airways because he was having to use it almost continuously. So what you need to understand that inside of the walls of your nose you have 3 pairs of excuse me, long thin bones, and these are called turbinates, nasal turbinates, which are covered with a layer of tissue. And that tissue and those thin bones can swell up. When you inhale something like a cold virus or an allergy trigger like dust or pet dander, those turbinates expand, making them, giving you less room in that nasal cavity, leading to congestion. And they contain ingredients like pseudoephedrine, which is like methamphetamine, only in the nose, and it works by narrowing the swollen blood vessels in your nasal tissue. So the primary reason for you to use the decongestant is to make sure you have more room for breathing. And these things come in many forms: syrups, pills, nasal sprays, pretty much the same no matter how you take it, except that spray just affects the blood vessels in your nose. Well, if you take something like Sudafed internally or orally, it works throughout your entire body. So what happens when you get dependent on one of these for more than a few days? Your body actually creates a rebound stuffiness when you stop. It can definitely help you feel less stuffed up at first, and for more than 3 days, it can make you feel worse. So you're not going to remember this because I didn't remember it. The phenomenon you get is called rhinitis medicamentosa. It's also called rebound rhinitis, which is easier to remember. And basically, your nasal tissues develop a tolerance to this nasal spray when you're using it and require that you use more and more of it to keep those blood vessels restricted. You think you need the spray to help you decongest, but in reality, it's actually plugging you up. As a result, you feel like your congestion is getting worse and you keep using more of that spray, creating a bad cycle. It doesn't mean you shouldn't use this at all. Use it for 72 hours, and then the Mayo Clinic says you should get a hold of your doctor to get off of it. But you really don't have to do that if you are aware there's other ways. And the ways we suggest, not that we don't suggest you going to the doctor's office, but the doctor is going to wean you off of that. And whether or not you need a physician to do that for you is relative. There is a spray called Ocean Spray. It's saline. And you can start using that in between the times you use the nasal decongestant. Now, we're only talking about a thing that says use every 12 hours and no more than 3 times a day. All of those drugs contain the same, all of those medications contain the same active medication, and that's oxymetazoline. And so if you'll see a saying that says neosynephrine, used every 12 hours. Vicks nasal spray, used every 12 hours. It's usually oxymetazoline. And usually they tell you not to use it more than for 72 hours. What you can get are neosynephrine drops that are 0.25% or 0.5% of actually phenylephrine, neosynephrine, and where these are a different medication entirely. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't use nasal decongestants at all. Use it for 1 or 2 or 3 days. I know about this because of almost crashing an airplane by a pilot who couldn't breathe because he forgot to bring that medication with him. We've known for years, and it used to be a prescription item. It isn't anymore, and that's what we find with a lot of things that used to be on prescription. You're more likely to become dependent on something like that than addicted. But many sprays say right on them, on the label, you shouldn't exceed 3 days of use. So if you're still really congested after that, you need to switch to something else, such as the Ocean Spray or normal saline. If you suspect that your spray has causing you to be addicted or dependent, it's helpful to see a doctor or a pharmacist who can make a plan for you to taper off. It works so good, we used to call it white gold because it came in a white container, and all of a sudden when you hadn't been able to breathe, you could breathe, and you want to use it more often. And the amount of time that will take you to get off of this spray varies depending on how stuffy you have gotten and how long you've been hooked on the spray. But if you don't have an underlying condition, you should feel better within a week after trying to taper off, and then you can finally breathe easily. It's one of those things that actually can be fixed. If it never would have got approved to be an over-the-counter item if it wasn't something that you could go to a doctor and fix it with. Unfortunately, we talked last week about ibuprofen over-the-counter. We've talked about omeprazole or Prilosec over-the-counter. We've talked about a lot of drugs that used to be on prescription that are now over-the-counter. And we find people taking the maximum amount of ibuprofen, which is 3,200 milligrams. It comes in a 200 milligram tablet to be taken over the counter. But if you take 2 of those or 4 of those, 4 times a day or 3 times a day, you're going to get over a toxic amount, which can make your gastrointestinal system be a real problem for you. So you want to be really careful. Just because those things are over the counter and you end up taking more and more of it, it can be a real issue. You wonder why we have you sign for Sudafed when you come, because it's behind the counter. That's because it's a risk of being addicted to, because it converts into a methamphetamine type product when it gets into your system. Some people have to take a decongestant every day, and if it's once a day, that's not a big deal. If it's 4 times a day and you continually buying it, it's monitored by the DEA. That's why we have to have a driver's license and and your address and a phone number and know where you are. So you got to watch these over-the-counter medications and make sure that you're just not overdoing it. We have a condition called tinnitus, which you've probably heard people talk about before. It's a ringing in your ears, and you may have experienced from time to time after going to a loud concert or mowing the lawn. But for some people, that perception is frequent or constant, and it's a symptom. It's not really a disease. And it's the sensation of hearing a sound when no external sound is present. So you will talk to somebody and they said, I have this constant pounding in my ears or ringing in my ears, or a clicking or a roaming, or you may hear it in one or in both ears, and the sound may be present all the time, or it may go on and off. If you have tinnitus that doesn't go away, you need to have a hearing evaluation, and it's recommended in most cases, and it's fully manageable. But for some, it's a chronic condition that can affect sleep and your daily functions, daily activities. There are options that can reduce its impact, and nobody knows why you get it. It's an idea that it results from damage to the cells of the inner ear, and that stems from the fact that about 90% of the people with tinnitus have some hearing loss caused by noise. And it even is more prevalent today because of 20 years ago, when you were going to these concerts and you turned it, they turned the volume up to where it made your ears hurt. We're running boats out there and cars that have decibels way above what you're supposed to have that hurt your ears if you've been out during our boat races or our cars, show cars, and they crank them way up and you have to put on earphones, or if you shoot guns a lot, those things can damage your ears. So in many people it has been linked to hearing loss, both age and noise related. It can occur from earwax blockage, from bone changes in the middle ear, and as side effects of medications often associated with tinnitus include head trauma or a concussion, or inner ear conditions, an acoustic neuroma, head or neck injuries, or problems with the joint where your lower bone meets your skull, high blood pressure, as well as factors that can increase blood pressure, such as stress. I had a friend that could hear his heart beating in his ear, and he was concerned about what was happening, and he finally decided to go down to Stanford and had it checked out. And he had an aneurysm in his brain, and they went in and cut the aneurysm, did the surgery, fixed him back up again, and he no longer has that anymore. So the options are treating an underlying condition. If it's due to health condition, you're able to recommend steps that could reduce the noise. Hearing aids, sometimes properly fitting, can address the hearing loss. Maskers in some cases are like white noise, help suppress tinnitus that is less bothersome. Several promising therapies include music therapy devices, TRT, which involves using devices to train the brain to ignore it, repetitive magnetic stimulation, medications. There's nothing that actually is approved to treat tinnitus, but certain antidepressants may help and reduce the severity of the symptoms. So try to seek a licensed therapist that can help you, an eye, ears, and nose person. Support groups are available also. And see what you can do if you have the tendency to have this kind of condition, because there are things that can help it. We're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we're going to talk about essential tremor.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if you've realized it, but we are right in the middle of winter. My name is Bill Kearney, owner of Northlake Medical Pharmacies. When the weather changes, it may not be as pleasant to drive to your pharmacy to pick up your prescriptions. We may have the solution for you. We now have free delivery to Kelseyville, Clear Lake Riviera, Riviera West, Riviera Heights, Buckingham, and still to Lakeport, Lucerne, Nice, and Upper Lake. If you want your prescriptions delivered at no delivery cost to you, now is the time to transfer your prescriptions to Northlake Medical Pharmacies. Or bring in your new prescriptions and we'll take care of you. Whether the weather is cold and rainy or a beautiful day and you don't want to take that ride into the pharmacy, give us a call. Northlake Medical Pharmacies, with 2 locations to serve you, on Hill Road next to Sutter Lakeside Hospital, or outside the Bruno Shop Smart, 347 Lakeport Boulevard.
Ukiah High School student Kaylin Tipton is organizing a softball tournament as her senior project. The Ball for It All softball tournament will take place Saturday, April 21st, and will be hosted at the Ukiah Sports Complex, and the team fee is $250, and the deadline to register is Friday, April 6th. You can register at the Recreation Office at 411 West Clay Street or online at ukiahrecdesk.com. For more info, please call 489-6307.
A single ember from a wildfire can travel over a mile. It can ignite and destroy your home and even your community. To that ember, all those branches hanging over your roof might as well be giant matchsticks ready to spark. The pile of dry leaves and twigs clogging your gutters are the perfect kindling to start a fire. And all those debris piles and brush around your yard which you haven't taken care of yet are pure lighter fluid, ready to ignite. There are some fire hazards that aren't clearly marked, and they can impact you and your neighbors. Learn to spot them, because your home is better protected from wildfire damage when your whole community is prepared. Visit fireadapted.org for more tips on how to get started adapting your home and community to wildfires. A public service message brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
We bring the community closer together, supporting business in every way. We're helping make your dreams come true, working hard for you.
The Lake County Chamber of Commerce would like to recognize their Member of the Month, Tompkins Tax Consultants. John and Diane Tompkins have been serving Lake County since 1974 and have been a member of the Lake County Chamber of Commerce for 24 years. They provide services to many small businesses and individuals in Lake and Mendocino County. Their main office is located in Lucerne off Highway 20, and they also have a second satellite location in Lakeport at 576 Lakeport Boulevard. For more information, reach them at 274-1843.
Lake County Chamber of Commerce, we're steady and strong, help us shape the future.
All right, we are back.
We are. Whoa.
Hey, let me turn that down a little
We
bit.
are.
There we go.
We are back. Yeah. Many of you have not heard of this before, and the reason that I wanted to relate this condition is because I have it. And sometimes you wonder, does he have everything? I mean, he's bad back, breaks every bone in his body. This is called essential tremor. And if you have it, you know you have it. And it's when your hands shake, when you're trying to eat some food, or your fork shakes, or you're trying to eat some soup with a spoon, and the spoon is shaking so much you can't get it to your mouth. And that's a classic sign of essential tremor. And it's a nervous system disorder that can cause involuntary, and you don't know that this is going to happen, tremors, and it's like Parkinson's disease. And The benign essential tremor is actually more common. It isn't a dangerous thing. It's embarrassing. It can take a toll on your quality of life. You may find it difficult to perform some of the simple tasks, such as writing a letter. I take a drug for this. I take altenolol for high blood pressure, and this condition doesn't happen until you get a little fatigue. So about after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, unless I take a second one of those, which is designed for essential tremor as well, the tremor goes away. But I can't write a check. I can't. If I write a note to somebody, if I take a prescription, I recopy it after I get it. Experts aren't really sure why it happens. A large percentage of people that are diagnosed with have a family history of it. I grew up on a farm. I wouldn't have known if my dad had no feeling. Well, I think he didn't have any feeling, but if he didn't have any feeling in an extremity or something, I would never know it, because he would never, it wasn't appropriate for the man of the family to have anything that was a problem physically or mentally. So environment factors are thought to have an impact as well. It's noticed when you use your hands with the tremor worsening at the end of the action, and because we didn't have pill counters when I got into pharmacy in 1966 or 67. We did everything by hand. If you've ever watched them advertise pharmacies, you'll see a little tray and somebody with a spatula, and you're counting pills by fives, and that's the way you fill the prescriptions. Now we have automatic machines that do a good part of that, so you're not using that same movement as much as I was the last 35 or 40 years. Stress, fatigue, caffeine, extreme temperatures can worsen them. They tend to be focused in the hands, the voice, and the head. If your head is affected, you may notice a yes, yes, or a no, no motion. Unlike Parkinson's, essential tremor doesn't cause other health problems. However, some people may develop an unsteady gait. So while there's no specific test, your doctor may take a history of your symptoms and perform a physical exam, order blood or urine tests to rule out other conditions. You may be asked to draw a spiral, hold your arms outstretched, or take a sip from a glass of water, so your doctor can see how your tremor responds. It's not clear whether it's essential tremor or Parkinson's disease. Then imaging, called the dopamine transporter, can scan, often differentiate between the two. In my case, it was really easy to determine. I saw my physician years ago at the end of the day instead of at the beginning of the day, and I had that condition, and I'd had it for years, and I didn't know there was anything to treat it. I just thought it's because of the amount of injuries I've had that my nerve composure in my hands and my arms is somewhat limited. But my physician prescribed a beta blocker, which was altenolol, and you can get Botox injections, you can take sedatives. The great thing about the beta blocker was it didn't affect you mentally or physically, except those tremors stopped. My problem is, I should take it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then that would be enough to get me to bedtime, and it doesn't make any difference. But, I don't take it till I get home, and if I go to dinner or someplace like that, I still exhibit some of those symptoms if I haven't taken the beta blocker. Sometimes physical or occupational therapy to build muscle strength and control. This is purely in my hands. Deep brain stimulation, which can short-circuit signals that are causing tremors in people. Ultrasound is a new technique that's being used to treat essential tremor. You may be able to change your lifestyle to help control the conditions. Strategies can include avoiding caffeine and stimulants and meditation. I used to meditate, and the busier you get, the less time you take for yourself to meditate, and the more difficult it is to meditate. But that's always a good yoga, those kind of things, and meditations are really something that helps your body respond to that. Making adaptive changes, this is utilizing voice recognition technology on your phone, but again, it doesn't affect my voice or computer instead of typing, or using a straw to drink, though drinking a small amount of alcohol will relieve those tremors sometimes. It's not a recommended treatment because tremors may worsen when alcohol wears off and could eventually lead to alcohol abuse. So normally it counts for at least 50% of the cases when people are getting the tremors, thinking it could be Parkinson or it could be essential tremor. The age of onset is common in those 65 and older, though it can develop in younger adults, which it did in me, usually around the age of 50. As a younger age, it's noticeable typically during everyday activities or at the end of the day with those activities. Hands and arms can also affect head, voice, eyelids, and rarely legs and feet. Usually doesn't affect walking, except in severe cases, unlike Parkinson's, which slow movement, stiffness, and difficulties walking or staying balanced are common. Alcohol consumption can improve it initially, but temporarily worsens it when it wears off. Alcohol really has no effect on Parkinson's-like tremors. And the stress, of course, worsens the tremor in both cases, in essential tremor and also in Parkinson's disease. So hopefully, if you hadn't heard about it, excuse me, you now know excuse me, a little bit about it, and that there can be treatment for it, which even I, as a pharmacist, didn't know until it affected me. So, you know, breast cancer is a huge problem these days, and more people, I think, have gotten used to looking for it and doing an exam on their breasts and looking for a lump. But is breast cancer always accompanied by a lump? And it isn't always. Many women with breast cancer never have any signs or symptoms, and their cancer is found on a screening test such as a mammogram. Among women who do experience warning signs, a lump in the breast or underarm is the most common red flag. However, as recent study illustrates, some women will discover their cancer because they're experiencing other less common signs. British researchers at Cancer Institute last year or the year before that studied 2,300 women that were diagnosed with breast cancer. 83% sought medical attention because they found a lump. As we know, most people find it that way. But for other women, it was nipple abnormalities such as discharge or a nipple that turned inward, breast and non-breast related pain such as a back pain, unintentional weight loss, can also cause changes in the skin of the breast or to the nipple and areola such as dimpling and pitting. Similar in appearance to an orange peel, so thickening, reddening, scaling, itching, swelling, with or without a lump. Depending on the symptoms, those changes may be attributed to rare cancer, such as Paget's disease, or an unusual but aggressive form of breast cancer. And there appears to be, I don't know if it's just because I know people now that have had this very aggressive breast cancer and had not much time to treat it. But it's worth noting that breast changes, including lumps, often turn out to be non-cancer, non-benign. But it's a good idea whenever you find a lump, become familiar with how your breasts normally feel so that you can alert your doctor to any changes and get them checked out if they don't resolve within a few weeks. This British study also found it took women with non-lump signs and symptoms longer to seek care than it did women who found lumps. And that's purely because we aren't educated to be looking for that. So there are situations where that is occurring and you never really thought about it before, and now you have a little bit to go on. So if you have anything that seems related that is different than you normally have, whether it be a lump on your breast or a lump on your arm or your back or something like that. Certainly have it treated and looked at and make sure that it's nothing unusual. We talked a little bit about psoriasis. Again, our number is 263-5254. I keep forgetting that, to remember that number, 263-5254. Psoriasis to most of us is just a little rash, or it could be a substantial red patches of skin covered with silvery scales. Could be dry, cracked skin that may bleed on itching and burning, thickened, pitted, or rigid nails. Most types of psoriasis go through cycles, and it flares for a few weeks and then subsides for a time, and then it comes back, and then it goes into full remission. In addition to the scaly skin, a form of arthritis may also develop. It's called psoriatic arthritis. That becomes very painful. Swollen, painful joints that are similar to other forms of arthritis can range from mild to severe and can affect any joint. Normally, we start out with somebody with psoriasis with a steroid type or a coal tar type of a topical treatment. The first line of psoriasis management is creams and ointments that are applied to the skin to treat mild psoriasis, and topical treatments that are also combined with other treatments if symptoms are more severe, such as light therapy, or we call it phototherapy. The natural or artificial light slows the skin cell turnover and reduces scaling and inflammation. I know friends of mine that have psoriasis and have psoriatic arthritis, and they've done all of these things, and they still are embarrassed to be in public because their skin keeps flaking off. I have a relative of mine that's down in Southern California that has had it for probably 20 years, since he was 30 years old, and it flares up, and it gets to the point, and he came up and did some things at my home a few years ago, and he would scratch his legs and arms until they would bleed, and he just couldn't stop. I mean, and the more he scratched them, the better they felt, but nothing was healing. So the simplest form of phototherapy is ultraviolet light, and it uses controlled doses of UVB, which is used to treat single patches or widespread. If you use that plus ultraviolet A, it's a light sensitizing medication before exposure, and then extreme laser, which directs a powerful UVB light to affected skin patches, and the number of sessions varies. So then you go on systemic medications, things that you take internally. Almost everybody that has a long-term form of this condition gets on methotrexate. Methotrexate, orally or injected, helps treat it by decreasing the production of skin cells and suppressing the inflammation. It's used many years ago. It was used for cancer in low doses, and it because it kept the cells from reproducing rapidly, and many people that are on chemotherapy now still take methotrexate. But it also slows the progression of psoriatic arthritis, so it's generally well tolerated in low doses. It may cause a bit of stomach upset or loss of appetite, and you need to do blood tests to make sure that your LFT test for the liver function test to make sure it doesn't affect your liver, and a blood count to make sure that your red blood cell count is okay. Cyclosporine is another drug, which is a Gengraf or Neorol that suppresses the immune system, but it's more rapid in effectiveness. It does a faster job of keeping those cells from dividing. It's usually only taken short term. But like other immune suppressant drugs, it increases your risk of infection. And then biologicals, and those are the newest thing that has come out. And many of you who may be listening have taken these or attempted to take these or are still taking these. Enbrel is one of those, Humira, Stelara, which most of these Humaro and Enbrel can be taken at home and they're called special prescriptions. Specialty RX is what they're called. And usually people don't come to us for those because the copay is higher than they are at our chain store competitor. We have nothing to do with the copay. The copay is designed by the pharmacy benefit manager, and it's designed so chain stores can make a profit off it, and independent stores lose money on it, and you pay more money. My relative has been on Stelara, been on Humira, been on Enbrel, and there's new ones coming out all the time. You'll see a good amount of nighttime prime television that is advertising psoriasis conditions and the drugs for psoriasis, as well as chemotherapy drugs. So good skin is a critical daily step in controlling it. Bathe daily and use the moisturizer. You need to get a moisturizer that probably has urea in it that will absorb moisture and keep the skin as mild as you can. But these things are, they start out as just a small little rash, and they can end up, I mean, I had a patient 10 years ago that lived in Arizona, and they couldn't even come out of their room. The room was completely dark. Light made the skin cells grow even faster, and they couldn't go to work, lost their job, got on disability. At that point, psoriatic arthritis was not viewed as something that was necessarily a disability as far as working goes. And so
You got one.
happens every
You
time.
got one now,
Yeah.
too. We've both been getting messages.
I don't know what it is lately, but
Yeah.
anyway, they have lots of new things have come out for psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, but they're very, very pricey. And most of those companies will get you a coupon to this person will never forgive me. Will give you a coupon to get the cost down, and you realize how much they're really making on some of these drugs to be able to pay for 90% of it. So, and then if you do any kind of a governmental
Wow, they're persistent.
I may have to, if this happens one more time, I may have to answer that. Anyway, a coupon to help you get through the financial burden of getting this drug. And then when you find out that it's productive and it really is helping you, then it's easier to get a coupon even online through the computer system now to get it going. So just another one of those things that most of us don't have to deal with, but way more people than you realize do have to deal with it. And there are things that can happen that all of a sudden you're a victim of one of these things. So you need to know where's the best thing that you can use, and if it's a good arthritis doctor that's testing you or treating you, they will probably, depending on the degree of what this is, they will probably do something to get you on one of those more expensive drugs in the very beginning and help you do that. The shingles shot, I'm giving it now more often. It's called Shingrix. It's an intramuscular shot, not a bunch of teachers met yesterday, and I had some questions from some of the retired teachers, and I got my second shot yesterday, it's a 2-shot vaccine, so you get one, and then 2 to 6 months later you get the second one. Most insurances aren't paying for it. One that I did yesterday, they paid nothing. My insurance, however, paid 50%. So It was, it's $150 normally a shot. It's $300 to get the entire series, which is 2 shots. And I would suspect at least Medicare D plans would start paying for it. If you're over 65, then you either have a Medicare D plan or you have a plan that's equal to or better than the Medicare D plan. So this isn't me now. This is Paul.
This is me now, yeah. See?
So if you haven't heard about it, it's 50 years old when you can start getting it. It's paid for by some insurance companies, but mostly I would wait if I could. If you've had the Zostavax shot, which is the other one for shingles, you have to wait 60 days before you get this one. So if you just got Zostavax, you can't get this other one until 60 days beyond that time. When you get this shot the first time, then you have 60 to 180 days to get the second shot. And I would just recommend thinking about it or having your pharmacy, which would be us in many cases, remind you when that was due. I happen to remember mine. I got mine on November or December 12th, and I was eligible on February 12th to get the second shot. So I wanted to find out if I had side effects that were substantial, because that's what it says in the literature, that this could be a more severe side effect than you got from the Zostavax. I gave my patient that information yesterday. I'm going to try to touch base with them today to see how they're doing. I had mine about 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. My arm was sore last night, a little bit sore now, but it's almost all gone away. The older you are, the less the side effects are. At 50, you get more side effects than you get at 60. At 60, you get more side effects than you do at 70. At 70, you get more side effects than you do at 80. And at 80, you get practically no side effects. And I'm not 80 yet, but I hope one day I will be, but you just never know. Anyway, we are still giving all of those kind of shots and tetanus and pneumonia and hepatitis. I have a person that's coming in to get hepatitis A and a pneumonia shot, and I believe a tetanus shot. I'm giving 2 of the 3 shots, and then we have to wait for the other one. So we continue to try to excel at giving those flu shots or those immune shots because of protecting yourself, so you have some sort of protection. So keep in mind that we're doing that. Keep in mind that we're North Lake Medical Pharmacy with a couple of locations for you at 5136 Hill Road East across from Sutter Lakeside Hospital. Call us there at 263-6192. And outside the Bruno Shop Smart at 347 Lakeport Boulevard. Call us there at 263-1328. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Bill. We'll see everybody back here again next Wednesday for Health Talk right here on AM 1270 and 96.5 FM, KXVX Lakeport.